Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're not just listening to a story, we're stepping into something much deeper, something older than gods, older than time as we understand it, a place where every life, including yours, is quietly woven, measured, and one day gently brought to its end. Because tonight, we explore the complete story of the Fates, the three silent forces in Greek mythology, who don't just decide when you die, but determine everything: the length of your life, the weight of your joy, the depth of your suffering, and every path you believe you chose. And as you listen, you may begin to notice something unsettling, that perhaps your life has never been random, that every moment, every decision, every unexpected turn has always been part of something already shaped. And maybe the question is not whether fate exists, but how much of your life has already been written. So tonight, let yourself drift, not just into sleep, but into a deeper understanding of the thread you are already walking. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now close your eyes, let the noise of the day slowly fade away, and allow yourself to descend gently into a place beneath the roots of the world, where the loom is always turning, where the threads are waiting, and where your story has already begun. I'm not sure when it started. Maybe it was after a deal I thought was certain quietly fell apart. Or maybe it was one of those days where you do everything right and still end up exactly where you didn't want to be. There was no dramatic moment, no clear breaking point, just a quiet, persistent feeling that something about life wasn't adding up. At first, I told myself the usual things: work harder, be smarter, adjust the strategy, stay disciplined, and I did. But the strange thing was, the outcomes didn't always follow. It felt as if I was making choices, but somehow the path kept folding back into itself, like walking through a maze that had already been drawn long before I stepped into it. Have you ever felt that? That subtle sense that despite all your effort, you are moving along something already shaped, already measured, already decided? I didn't want to believe that, because if that were true, then what exactly was I in control of? I started paying closer attention to the small moments, the decisions that seemed insignificant at the time. A message sent a few seconds earlier, a call I almost didn't take, a conversation that changed everything without warning. Each one felt random, but when I looked back, they didn't feel random anymore. They felt connected, as if each moment had been placed precisely where it needed to be, as if every turn, every delay, every unexpected outcome was part of something I couldn't quite see, but was already there. And that's when the question began to stay with me, even when I tried to ignore it. What if this isn't chaos? What if it only looks like chaos because I can't see the pattern? That thought didn't bring comfort. If anything, it unsettled me more, because it meant that maybe, just maybe, my life wasn't something I was building. Maybe it was something I was stepping into, something that had been quietly waiting, not controlling me in an obvious way, not forcing my hand, but guiding the structure underneath everything in a way so subtle I had never noticed it before. I remember one night, lying awake longer than usual. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet where your thoughts start to feel louder than they should. And I kept coming back to the same idea: if I'm not fully in control, then what is? It wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was curiosity, a kind of slow, persistent curiosity that felt older than logic. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't want an easy answer. I wanted the truth, even if it changed the way I saw everything. That was the moment I stopped trying to dismiss the feeling and started following it instead. Because sometimes the questions that disturb you the most are the ones that lead you exactly where you were meant to go. It's a strange thing to realize that the choices you trusted might not be as free as they felt. I began to replay certain moments in my mind, not the big decisions, but the quiet ones, the ones no one notices. Choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. Turning left instead of right without really knowing why. Saying yes when something inside you whispered no. At the time, each of these felt like mine. Personal, independent, real. But when I looked back, they didn't feel random anymore. They felt placed, Not forced, not controlled in any obvious way, but gently, almost invisibly, guided. And that's when a more uncomfortable thought began to form. What if the feeling of choice is not the same as actual freedom? What if we are not choosing the path, but simply walking the one that fits us, the one that was always going to feel like ours? It's not something you notice in the moment. In the moment, everything feels open, like a wide space full of possibilities. But when you step back, when you look at the pattern over time, those possibilities begin to narrow. Not because you failed to choose better, but because only certain paths ever truly existed for you. And somehow you always found your way back to them. I tried to resist that idea. I told myself, no, I make my own decisions. And maybe that's true in a way. But then I started asking a quieter question. Where do those decisions come from? Why did I want what I wanted in that exact moment? Why did something feel right even when it made no logical sense? Why did some paths feel impossible to take, even when they were clearly available? The answers were never clear. And the more I looked, the more it felt like the decisions weren't starting with me. They were arriving, already shaped, already weighted, as if something deeper had already leaned the balance before I even became aware of it. And that's when I understood something. Not fully, but enough to feel it. Maybe control isn't what we think it is. Maybe it isn't about choosing anything we want, but about moving naturally through what was always going to unfold. Like a current beneath the surface, quiet, steady, almost impossible to notice until you stop fighting it. And when you do, you begin to see something else. Not a loss of control, but a pattern, a structure so subtle it hides behind every decision you believe you've made. And once you see even a glimpse of it, it becomes very hard to pretend it isn't there. I wasn't looking for answers that night. Not really. I was just trying to quiet my mind the way you do when thoughts begin to circle without ever settling. So I did what I usually do. I reached for something simple. A story. A voice. Something ancient enough to feel distant from my own life. That's when I found it. A story I hadn't heard in years, or maybe had never truly listened to. It wasn't about heroes, not about battles or kings, or gods fighting for power. It was about something quieter, something that didn't need to fight at all. 3 figures always there but never at the center. The Fates. I remember pausing for a moment because even the name felt heavier than I expected. Not dramatic, not loud, just inevitable. At first, I thought I knew what they were. Everyone does in a way. 3 old women, spinning thread, cutting it when your time comes. Clearly a simple image, almost too simple. But as I listened, something shifted, because the story wasn't about death, not really. It was about everything that comes before it. The beginning, the middle, and the quiet, unavoidable end. And the more I listened, the more I realized they weren't background figures. They weren't minor details in someone else's story. They were the reason there was a story at all. It's a strange feeling to discover something that has always been there, hidden in plain sight. Like a pattern you never noticed until suddenly you can't unsee it. The voice continued, slow, steady, almost hypnotic. It spoke of threads, of lives being spun, measured, and one day quietly cut. Not as punishment, not as reward, but as something older than both. And I found myself listening differently, not just hearing the words, but feeling them. Because something about it felt familiar, not in a way I could explain, but in a way that made everything feel a little less random, as if the question I had been asking without knowing how to say it was already waiting for me inside this story. I didn't realize it then, but that moment, that quiet decision to listen, was the beginning of something. Not an answer, not yet, but a path. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to control where it would lead. I just wanted to follow it and see what I would find. And then the question finally became clear. Not loud, not urgent, but steady, like something that had been waiting for me to notice it all along. What if it's all already written? Not in a way that traps you, not in a way that takes something away, but in a way that quietly shapes everything beneath the surface. I didn't say it out loud, I didn't need to, because once the thought appeared, it stayed. And I could feel the weight of it, not heavy like fear, but deep like something ancient, something that doesn't need to prove itself. Because if that were true, if the thread of a life already exists before it begins, then what does it mean to choose? What does it mean to try, to struggle, to hope for something different? I let those questions sit without rushing to answer them. The voice in the story continued, calm, unbothered, as if it had heard this question 1,000 times before. It spoke of beginnings, of threads being spun, not randomly, but precisely, each one different, each one already carrying something within it. And I realized something I hadn't expected. The idea didn't feel like a prison, it felt like a pattern so large, so complete, that from where I stand, it only looks like chaos. Like looking at a tapestry from too close, seeing only knots, loose ends, pieces that don't seem to belong. But stepping back, even just a little, you begin to sense there is something more, something intentional, something whole. And maybe, just maybe, the reason things feel uncertain isn't because they are meaningless, but because I'm only seeing a small part of something much larger. I thought about the moments I had tried to control the most. The times I held on tightly, trying to force an outcome, trying to shape things exactly the way I wanted. And how often those moments led to frustration, to resistance, to a kind of quiet exhaustion, as if I was pushing against something I couldn't see. But if the thread already exists, if the path already has a form, then maybe the struggle isn't necessary in the way I thought. Maybe the effort isn't about changing the path, but about learning how to walk it. And that idea slowly began to change something in me. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way, just a subtle shift, a softening, a willingness to stop fighting every unknown, to stop needing every answer immediately, to sit with the possibility that life is not something I have to force into place, but something I am already moving through. And for the first time, the question didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an invitation. Not to give up control, but to understand it differently. To see that maybe control was never about holding everything tightly, but about being present inside the thread as it unfolds. And somewhere in that quiet realization, I found something unexpected. Not certainty, but calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from knowing everything, but from no longer needing to. I remember the moment the story shifted. It was subtle, almost easy to miss, but something in the tone changed, as if what I was about to hear wasn't just myth anymore. It wasn't introducing characters the way stories usually do, not as heroes, not as gods with names you're meant to admire. It began somewhere deeper, somewhere older, before kings, before wars, before anything that felt familiar, before even the gods themselves. There was night. Not the night we know, not the quiet darkness that comes and goes with the sun, but something vast, endless, silent, a presence that existed before anything had shape, before anything had a name. And from that darkness, they came, not born in the way we understand birth, not raised, not chosen. They simply were the fates. And what unsettled me most wasn't what they did. It was when they existed, because if they came before the gods, then nothing stands above them. Not power, not creation, not even the rulers of the sky. The story didn't need to explain it, it didn't try to justify it, it just stated it, calmly, as if it had always been understood. That even Zeus, with all his thunder, all his authority, existed within something he did not control. I paused there, because that idea changes everything. We're taught in almost every story that power sits at the top, that there is always something, someone, who can override the rest. But this was different. This wasn't power. This was inevitability. Something that doesn't argue, doesn't demand, doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. And I started to see why they were never placed at the center of the stories. Because if you truly understand them, there is no story left to fight against. No rebellion, no victory, no escape, only a path already measured, already moving. The gods could influence, they could interfere, they could change moments, but they could not change the thread. And somehow that made the world feel quieter. Not empty, not meaningless, just quieter, as if beneath all the noise, all the effort, all the struggle, there is something steady, something unshaken. I thought about how much energy we spend trying to control outcomes, trying to predict, trying to secure something that feels uncertain. And yet, if something like this exists, then the structure is already there, not visible, not obvious, but present. And for a moment, I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me resisted it because it challenges everything we've been taught about effort, about control, about becoming something more. But another part of me, a quieter part, felt something else, something closer to relief. Because if the foundation is already set, if the thread already has its length, its weight, its direction, then maybe not everything depends on me holding it together. Maybe I'm not carrying the entire structure the way I thought I was. And as that idea settled in, slowly, I began to understand why the story started here. Not with action, not with conflict, but with something older than both. Because before anything happens, before any life begins, before any choice is made, there is already a pattern. And whether we see it or not, it has always been there, waiting quietly, patiently, for us to notice. And then the story began to focus, not on the whole, but on the first movement within it, the beginning, the moment something becomes something. Her name was Clotho, the spinner, the one who begins the thread. At first, it sounded simple, almost too simple to matter, but the longer I stayed with it, the more I realized this might be the most important moment of all. Because everything that follows, everything we call life, depends on this first act. I tried to imagine it, not as a symbol, but as something real, somewhere far beneath everything I know, beneath cities, beneath oceans, beneath even the idea of time as I understand it. There is a place where something begins, quietly, without announcement. And in that place, Clotho sits. Not old in the way we imagine age, not fragile, not slow, but still steady, focused. Her hands moving with a rhythm that doesn't need to be learned, because it has never been forgotten. And in her hands, something almost invisible becomes form. A thread. At first, it is thin, barely there, fragile, like something that could disappear if you looked away. And yet, it doesn't break. It continues, pulled gently, shaped carefully, not rushed, not forced, just brought into being. And as I sat with that image, something shifted inside me again, because I started to realize there was a moment, just like that, for me, a moment I don't remember, a moment I was never aware of. When something began, not just my body, not just my presence in the world, but my thread, the texture of it, the direction of it, the quiet qualities that would shape everything I would later call myself. And that thought was different from anything I had considered before, because it suggests that who I am didn't begin when I started making decisions. It began much earlier, before thought, before identity, before I had any sense of control, and somehow, Clotho doesn't choose. That part stayed with me. She doesn't decide what kind of thread to spin. She doesn't pause, she doesn't weigh, she doesn't judge. Her hands simply know, and the thread becomes what it becomes. Some threads are thick, coarse, strong, the kind that carry weight, that endure pressure, that move through life with a kind of grounded force. Others are fine, delicate, almost luminous, the kind that reflect light, that move gently, that feel everything more deeply. Some threads glow faintly gold, others remain muted, quiet, almost unnoticed, and none of them are better, none of them are chosen with preference, they simply are. And for the first time, I began to question something I had always assumed, that I was shaping myself from nothing, that I was building who I am, through effort, through decisions, through control. But what if some part of me was already there, not fixed, not rigid, but formed in a way I didn't create? And if that's true, then maybe the struggle to become something else, to force myself into a different shape, isn't always necessary. Maybe some of that effort is resistance, not growth. And that idea felt both uncomfortable, and strangely gentle, because it doesn't remove responsibility, it just shifts it from trying to become everything to understanding what you already are. And I stayed with that image, Clotho spinning quietly without hesitation, without doubt, not watching the world, not concerned with outcomes, just beginning again and again. And somewhere in that repetition, in that endless rhythm, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not certainty, not control, but something softer, something like acceptance, that maybe, just maybe, the beginning of my story wasn't something I had to understand. It was something that had already been given, and all I had ever done was continue the thread that had already begun. And after the thread begins, after it leaves Clotho's hands, there is a moment, quiet, almost suspended, where nothing seems to happen. But that moment does not last, because every beginning moves towards something, and that is where she appears. Lachesis, the one who measures. I remember feeling something shift again when her role was described, because this is where the story becomes more personal, more precise. It is one thing to imagine that life begins somewhere beyond your control. It is something else entirely to realize that its length, its weight, its shape might already be decided before you ever take your first step. I tried to picture her, sitting across from the loom, not hurried, not uncertain, but focused, deliberate. In her hands, a rod, simple, unadorned, and yet it holds something I cannot fully understand. Because when the thread reaches her, she does not just measure time, she measures everything. The length of a life, yes, but also the density within it, the quiet weight of joy, the sharp edges of loss, the moments that will feel light, and the ones that will stay with you long after they pass. And I found myself wondering, what would it mean if that was already known? If the laughter I haven't experienced yet, the pain I haven't understood yet, the moments I am still waiting for, have already been accounted for, not predicted, but placed carefully, precisely, as part of something larger than I can see. And the idea that stayed with me the longest was this: a long life is not always a gift, and a short one is not always a loss. That goes against everything we're taught. We chase time, we protect it. We measure it as if more of it automatically means more meaning. But Lachesis doesn't measure value that way. She measures balance. A life filled with years may also carry burdens, responsibilities, regrets. A life that ends early may still hold moments so full, so complete, that nothing more was needed. And that thought was difficult to accept at first, because it challenges the idea that life should be fair. That effort should always lead to reward, that good things should last. But Lachesis does not measure fairness. She measures proportion. And that is not the same thing. Proportion doesn't ask what you deserve. It simply asks what belongs, what fits within the pattern. And slowly, I began to see something, that maybe the question I had been asking all this time, why did this happen, was the wrong question. Because from her perspective, nothing happens without a place. Nothing is random, nothing is misplaced. Even the moments that feel out of order might simply be part of a sequence. I cannot yet understand. I thought about my own life again, the moments that felt too early, the ones that felt too late, the things that ended before I was ready, and the things that stayed long after they should have. And for the first time, I considered something different. What if they weren't mistakes? What if they were measurements? Not perfect, not comfortable, but exact. And that idea didn't give me answers. It gave me space. Space to stop forcing meaning into everything immediately. Space to stop judging each moment as good or bad, right or wrong. And instead, to simply see it as part of something already being shaped. Lachesis does not rush. She does not second guess. She does not go back to adjust what has already been measured. Once the thread is set, it is set. And that finality, that quiet certainty is what makes her role so powerful, because it reminds me that life is not something being decided in real time. It is something unfolding. And whether I understand it or not, the measure has already been made, and all I am doing is living what has already been given. And then there is the one we spend most of our lives trying not to think about, the one whose presence is quiet, patient, and impossible to escape, Atropos, the one who cuts the thread. I noticed something as the story spoke of her. It did not describe her with fear, not in the way I expected. There was no darkness surrounding her, no anger, no judgment, just stillness. A kind of stillness that doesn't come from emptiness, but from certainty. And that unsettled me more than anything else, because I realized the fear we feel around endings might not come from what they are, but from what we don't understand about them. I tried to imagine her, sitting across from the threads, not watching them the way we watch things, not waiting with impatience, but simply knowing which thread has reached its end, not by counting, not by checking, but by something deeper. Something that doesn't require time as we measure it, and in her hands, a simple pair of shears, not glowing, not divine, not dramatic, just worn, familiar, used more times than anything else in existence. And I kept coming back to that detail, because it changes everything. The most final act, the one we fear the most, is carried out by something so ordinary. As if to say, this is not an exception. This is the rule. And the moment itself is not loud. It is not marked by anything we would recognize as grand. It is quiet, almost unnoticed. A breath that does not return. A heartbeat that simply stops. And somewhere beyond what we can see, the thread is cut, not early, not late, exactly when it must be. That word stayed with me. Must. Not because of force, not because of obligation, but because of completion. And that's when I began to understand something, slowly, carefully. Atropos does not end life, she completes it. That distinction felt small at first, but the more I sat with it, the more it changed the way I saw everything, because an ending that is forced feels wrong, but an ending that is complete feels different. It carries a kind of quiet finality, not something taken, but something finished. And I thought about the moments in my life that had ended, not just people or time, but phases, versions of myself, things I once held tightly, and how I resisted those endings, how I tried to extend them, to hold them in place, to pretend they weren't changing. But they ended anyway, not always suddenly, sometimes slowly. So slowly I didn't notice until it was already over, and I wondered, what if those endings weren't failures? What if they were completions, not mistakes, not losses, but the natural point where something had reached its end, and I had simply been unwilling to see it. Atropos does not hesitate. She does not pause to consider whether a life deserves more time. She does not weigh potential or regret or unfinished plans, because from where she sits, nothing is unfinished. If the thread has reached its end, then it has already become everything it was meant to be. And that idea changed something in me. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly it softened something, the part of me that feared endings, the part that tried to control time, to stretch it, to keep things exactly as they were. And in that softness, I began to feel something else. Not acceptance, not fully, but the beginning of it. The possibility that maybe endings are not interruptions. They are part of the pattern, as necessary as beginnings, as natural as the middle, and somewhere beneath all the noise, all the resistance, all the questions, there is a place where that truth feels simple, where the thread is not something to cling to, but something to experience while it is here. And when it is no longer here, it does not disappear. It simply becomes complete. And Atropos quietly, patiently moves on to the next. I didn't realize when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I stopped just listening to the story and began to feel as if I was inside it. Not in a dramatic way, not like stepping into a different world all at once, but slowly, gently, as if something was pulling my attention downward, away from noise, away from everything familiar, into something quieter, deeper. It felt like descending, not falling, not losing control, but moving downward, with intention, as if there was somewhere I was meant to go. The air in my mind grew still, not empty, just waiting. And I began to imagine the place the story described, not above the clouds, not in some distant sky, but beneath everything, beneath the ground, beneath the roots of trees, beneath the layers of stone that have held the world together for longer than memory. A place untouched by sunlight, untouched by time as I understand it. And the deeper I followed that image, the quieter everything became. Sounds faded, thoughts slowed, even the sense of myself became softer, less defined, until there was only the movement downward into something ancient. And then I felt it, not something I could see clearly, but something I could sense, a space, vast, silent. Not empty, but full of something I couldn't name. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from nothing, but from something that has always been there. And in that stillness, there was a rhythm, very faint, almost impossible to hear at first, like wood gently creaking, like something moving slowly, endlessly, not hurried, not stopping, just continuing. And I understood, without needing to be told, this was the loom, not as an object, not as something separate from the world, but as something the world itself was built around. And I tried to take in what was there. Threads, more than I could count, hanging, suspended, stretching upward into darkness I couldn't see through. Each one different, some glowing softly as if they carried their own light, others dim, quiet, almost hidden, some thick, heavy, others so fine they seemed like they could disappear. And yet, every single one remained present, real. And I found myself wondering, which one is mine? Not as a question I expected to answer, but as something that naturally arises when you realize you are part of this, that your life, your moments, your thoughts are not separate from this place, they are connected to it. And for a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not fear, not confusion, but a kind of still awareness, as if everything I had been rushing through, everything I had been trying to control was happening on the surface, while something much deeper, much steadier, had been holding it all together the entire time. I didn't see the sisters yet. I didn't need to, because their presence was already there, in the rhythm, in the silence, in the endless continuation of the threads. And I stayed there, not moving, not questioning, just observing, because something about this place made it impossible to rush, impossible to demand answers. It asked for something else, something quieter, something closer to surrender. And for the first time, I didn't resist that feeling. I let myself remain in the stillness, let the rhythm continue, let the threads hang exactly as they were, and slowly, I began to understand. This is not where life begins. This is not where it ends. This is where it is held. Every moment, every breath, every choice suspended within something that has never stopped. And as that realization settled in, I felt something shift again, not outward, but inward, as if I was no longer just looking for answers. I was beginning to listen differently. As I remained there in that quiet space beneath everything, my eyes, or whatever part of me was seeing, began to adjust. The darkness didn't disappear, it softened, and within it, the threads became clearer. Not just lines, not just strands of something abstract, but something alive, in a way that didn't need movement. Each one holding a presence, a life. I found myself drawn closer, not physically, but in attention, as if something inside me wanted to understand. And the closer I looked, the more I began to notice. These threads were not separate. They crossed, they touched, they wove into one another, forming patterns I could not fully follow. A single thread would pass through dozens of others, intersecting, diverging, continuing on, and each intersection felt like something, a moment, a meeting, a decision, something that connects one life to another. And I began to realize no thread exists alone. No life moves independently. Every choice, every step, every moment touches something else and is touched in return. That idea settled in slowly because it changes the way you see everything. It means that what I thought was my life has never truly been mine alone. It has always been part of something shared, something woven. And I thought about the people I've met, the ones who changed me in ways I didn't expect, the ones who appeared at exactly the right moment, and the ones who left just as suddenly. At the time, it felt random, but now, Standing in this imagined space, looking at these threads, it felt intentional, not planned in a way I could control, but placed, as if those intersections were always meant to happen, not by force, but by design. And I followed one thread just for a moment, trying to trace it, to understand where it came from, where it was going, but it didn't stay simple. It crossed another and another and another, each crossing changing the direction subtly, quietly, until I lost track of it entirely. And that's when I understood something important. This pattern cannot be seen from inside it. Not fully. From where I stand, I only see fragments, pieces, moments that seem disconnected. But from here, from this deeper place, everything is connected. Every crossing, every turn, every unexpected shift belongs to something larger, something that doesn't need to explain itself. And I felt a strange sense of relief, because it meant that the moments I couldn't understand, the ones that felt out of place, might not be mistakes. They might simply be parts of the pattern I cannot yet see. I looked again at the threads, some bright, some dim, some stretched long, others ending quickly, and yet none of them seemed more important than the others. None stood above, none beneath. They were all necessary. And that idea stayed with me because it removes something we hold on to tightly. The idea that some lives matter more, that some paths are more valuable, that some outcomes are more successful. But here, none of that exists. There's only the thread and the way it moves within the whole. And I began to feel something shift again. A quiet release, not of responsibility, but of comparison, of the constant measuring, the constant questioning of whether I'm doing enough, being enough, becoming enough. Because if every thread has its place, then the value is not in becoming something else, but in being exactly what this thread is meant to be. And that thought didn't make everything clear. It didn't solve every question, but it made something softer. The need to constantly prove, the need to force direction. And in that softness, I remained watching the threads crossing, weaving, continuing. And for the first time, I didn't feel lost inside the pattern. I felt held by it. I stayed with that feeling, being held not by something I could name, but by something that did not need a name. And slowly, almost without realizing it, my attention turned inward. Not away from the threads, but deeper into what they meant. Because it is one thing to observe a pattern. It is something else to recognize that you are inside it. And that's when the question returned, quietly, without pressure. Which one is mine? Not to identify it, not to isolate it from the rest, but to understand how I exist within it. I closed my eyes, or at least I let go of the need to see outward. And instead, I tried to feel it. Not as an object, not as a line in space, but as something moving through me, a current, subtle, steady, always there, even when I wasn't paying attention. And I began to notice something. There are moments in life where everything feels aligned, not perfect, not easy, but right, as if you are exactly where you are supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to be doing. And then there are moments where everything feels off, where no matter what you do, something resists, something doesn't fit. And I started to wonder, what if those moments are not random? What if they are signals, not from outside, but from the thread itself? A kind of quiet feedback, letting you feel when you're moving with it and when you're pushing against it. I thought about times in my life when I forced things, tried to make something happen, tried to hold on to something that was already slipping away, and how heavy that felt, how exhausting, as if I was swimming against something invisible. And then I thought about other moments, when things unfolded without effort, when the next step appeared almost naturally, not because I wasn't trying, but because I wasn't resisting. And those moments felt different, lighter, clearer, as if I wasn't creating the path, I was discovering it. And that realization stayed with me because it suggests something I had never considered before, that maybe the purpose isn't to control the thread, it's to recognize it, to feel its direction, its movement, and to learn how to move with it, not passively, not without intention, but without unnecessary resistance. And I know that idea can be misunderstood. It can sound like giving up, like surrendering to something you cannot change, but it doesn't feel like that. Not here, not in this quiet place. It feels more like alignment, like stepping into something that was always moving and choosing to move with it. And I sat with that, not trying to fully define it, not trying to turn it into something logical, just allowing it to exist as a feeling. Because sometimes understanding doesn't come from thinking, it comes from noticing, from being still enough to feel what is already there. And as I stayed with that awareness, the threads around me continued, unchanged, crossing, weaving, forming patterns I could not fully see. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to trace them. I didn't need to follow every line. I just needed to know that somewhere within all of this, there is a path, and I am already on it, not searching for it, not building it from nothing, but walking it, step by step, whether I notice it or not, whether I understand it or not. And somehow that didn't make me feel small. It made me feel connected to something larger, something steady, something that has been there long before I ever asked the question and will remain long after I stop asking it. I didn't want to leave that place, not yet, because the more I stayed, the more something inside me began to settle. Not because I had answers, but because I no longer felt the same urgency to find them. The threads continued endlessly, crossing and weaving in ways I could not fully understand, and yet there was something else now, something I hadn't noticed before, a quiet awareness that I had been looking outward, trying to see the pattern, when perhaps I needed to feel where I stood within it. So I let my attention shift again, not to a specific thread, not to a single moment, but to the sense of movement itself. And slowly, I began to notice that the pattern wasn't just around me, it was moving through me, not as something separate, not as something distant, but as something I was already part of. Every breath, every thought, every memory, not isolated, not random, but connected, woven into something that continues, whether I am aware of it or not. And that's when a different kind of understanding began to emerge. Not about where I am going, but about where I am. Because I realized I spend so much time trying to predict what comes next, trying to prepare, to control, to make sure things unfold in a certain way. But in doing that, I move away from what is already happening, from the thread as it exists now. And I thought about how often I've lived ahead of myself, in future outcomes, in imagined scenarios, in things that haven't happened yet, or behind myself, in regrets, in past decisions, in moments I wished I could change, but rarely here, rarely fully present in the part of the thread I am actually living. And maybe that is where the real disconnection begins, not because the path is unclear, but because I am not fully within it. And as that thought settled in, I felt something shift again. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gently, a kind of return back into the present, back into the only place where the thread can actually be experienced. Because no matter how far it stretches, no matter how it was measured, no matter where it will end, it is only ever lived here, in this moment. And I realized that maybe this is the one thing that has always been mine. Not the length, not the outcome, not the pattern as a whole, but the experience of it, the way I move through each part, the way I respond, the way I see, the way I feel. And that doesn't contradict the idea of fate, it completes it. Because if the thread is already woven, then what remains is how it is lived, not to change its direction, but to be present within it, fully, honestly, without constant resistance. And I stayed there. With that realization, letting it settle without forcing it into words, the loom continued its quiet rhythm, the threads remained suspended in their silent pattern. Nothing around me changed, but something within me had the need to understand everything softened, the need to control every outcome loosened. And in its place, there was something else, something quieter, something steadier, a sense that I don't need to see the entire pattern, I don't need to trace every thread. I don't need to know how it all ends. I only need to be here, within this part of the thread as it unfolds, and maybe, just maybe, that is enough. Not because it answers every question, but because it removes the need for them to be answered all at once. And as I let that thought rest gently without holding onto it too tightly, I realized something else. I wasn't searching anymore. I was simply here, and for the first time, that felt complete. At some point, as I stayed with that quiet understanding, another thought began to rise. Slowly, almost reluctantly. If all of this is true, if the thread exists, if it has already been measured, if it will one day be cut, then what about power? What about those who seem to shape the world, who appear to decide outcomes, to control events, to bend reality to their will? Because all my life I had been taught something very simple. That power sits at the top, that those with enough strength, enough intelligence, enough influence can change their path and the paths of others. But this place, this quiet chamber beneath everything, suggested something different. It suggested that even the most powerful are still within the thread, and that idea felt almost impossible at first. So I let the story guide me again. It brought me back, not to a place of silence, but to a moment. A moment where even the greatest force in that world came face to face with something he could not command. Zeus, the king of the gods, the one who holds lightning in his hands, who rules the sky, who decides storms and seasons, the one who, in every other story, stands above all, and yet, even he walks into this place. Not as a ruler, but as something else. I imagined it not as a scene of confrontation, not as a battle, but as something quieter, something far more unsettling. Zeus entering the chamber, expecting to be recognized, to be acknowledged, expecting the world to respond to his presence, but nothing changes. The threads do not pause, the loom does not slow, the sisters do not look up, and for the first time, power means nothing. That image stayed with me because it strips away everything we usually associate with control. No force, no authority, no status can alter what has already been woven. And I thought about that, not as a myth, but as a reflection. Because in our own lives, we chase control in similar ways. We believe that if we gain enough, if we become enough, we will finally be able to shape everything exactly as we want. But what if that's not how it works? What if control is never absolute, no matter how high you rise? What if even the most powerful position still exists within something greater, something that cannot be changed, only navigated? And suddenly, the idea of control began to feel different. Not something you achieve completely, but something you experience partially within limits you don't always see. And I realized maybe that's why certain things, no matter how much effort we put in, still don't change. Not because we failed, but because they were never ours to change. And that thought could feel heavy if you resist it, but if you sit with it, it begins to shift. It becomes something else, something closer to clarity, because if even Zeus cannot change the thread, then maybe the expectation that I should control everything was never realistic to begin with. Maybe the pressure, the constant need to fix, to force, to make everything go a certain way comes from believing I have more control than I actually do. And slowly, that pressure began to ease, not because I gave up, but because I began to see things differently. Effort still matters, action still matters, but not as a way to override the pattern, only as a way to move within it. And that distinction is subtle, but it changes everything, because it means I am not here to dominate the path. I am here to walk it, not blindly, not passively, but with awareness, with a sense of where I stand within something larger. And as I stayed with that thought, the image of Zeus leaving the chamber without resistance, without argument, began to make sense, not as defeat, but as understanding. Because there are moments where the greatest strength is not forcing change, but recognizing what cannot be changed and adjusting accordingly. And in that recognition, something shifts again, not outward, but inward. A quiet release from the illusion that everything depends on me controlling it, and in that release, There is space to breathe, to observe, to move, not against the thread, but with it. And for the first time, that didn't feel like limitation. It felt like freedom of a different kind. And then the story turned again, not toward gods, not toward power, but toward those we are taught to admire the most, the ones we believe stand above ordinary lives, heroes, the ones whose names are remembered, whose stories are told again and again, the ones we look to when we want to believe that something greater is possible. I've always been drawn to them. The idea that someone can rise above their limits, shape their destiny, become something extraordinary through will, through courage, through choice. It's a comforting idea because it suggests that no matter where you start, you can change the outcome. You can become something more. But standing here within this quiet understanding, I began to see something different, because even the heroes have threads, and those threads are no different from any other, perhaps brighter, perhaps more intense, but still measured, still finite. I thought about Achilles, the warrior who could not be defeated, whose strength was unmatched, whose name would echo through time. And yet, his life was not long. It burned, fast, brilliant. And then it ended. Not by accident, not by chance, but exactly as it had been measured. And I wondered, did he ever feel that? Did he sense that his path was already set, that his choices were moving him towards something inevitable? Or did it feel like freedom, like power, like he was shaping everything himself? Because from the outside, it looks like choice. He chose glory over a long, quiet life. He chose to fight, to become legend. But what if that choice was always part of the thread? Not forced, not imposed, but woven into who he was from the very beginning. And that idea stayed with me, because it means that even the moments that feel like defining choices, destinedness, may not be as open as they seem. They may be expressions of something already there, already measured, already leaning in a certain direction. I thought about Odysseus, the one who wandered for years, who faced storms, monsters, gods themselves, and still found his way home. His story feels like resilience, like intelligence, like survival against impossible odds. But his thread was long, not easy, not smooth, but long. And every turn, every delay, every struggle belonged to that length. Not random, not unnecessary, but part of the path that was always his. And I began to see that what we call greatness might not be about escaping fate, but about fully living the thread that was given. No shortcuts, no extensions, just intensity, presence, completion, and that changes something because it removes the idea that heroes are different from us in the way that matters most. They are not outside the pattern. They are within it, just as we are. Their lives may look larger, more dramatic, more visible, but at the level of the thread, they are no different. They begin, they are measured, they are completed, and for a moment, that felt almost disappointing because it challenges the idea that someone somewhere has found a way beyond all of this, that someone has escaped. But the more I sat with it, the more it began to feel grounding. Because it means there is no comparison to chase, no standard to measure yourself against, no need to become something extraordinary to justify your existence. The thread does not demand that. It only asks that it be lived, fully, honestly, as it is, and that thought softens something again. The pressure to be more, to do more, to become something beyond what I already am. Because if even the greatest stories unfold exactly as they were meant to, then maybe my life doesn't need to be extraordinary in someone else's eyes. It only needs to be complete. And in that realization, I felt something shift again, not upward, not outward, but inward, a quiet acceptance that I am not here to become a hero. I am here to live the thread I have been given, and that is already enough. And after sitting with that, after letting the idea of heroes settle into something quieter, something more grounded, another realization began to surface, slowly, almost gently. If even gods cannot escape, if even heroes are not outside the pattern, then what I had always called control might not be what I thought it was. I used to believe control meant direction, that if I planned carefully, worked consistently, made the right decisions. I could guide my life exactly where I wanted it to go, and in many ways, that belief kept me moving, kept me disciplined, kept me focused. But there were always moments, small at first, then harder to ignore, where things didn't follow that logic, moments where effort didn't lead to the expected result, where the outcome shifted despite everything being done right. And I would question it, try to analyze it, adjust my approach, as if somewhere there was a mistake I could correct. But standing here within this understanding, I began to see something different. Maybe it wasn't a mistake, maybe it was a limit, not a limit in ability, not a limit in effort, but a limit in control itself. And that's when the idea became clearer, not as a concept, but as something I could feel. Control is not absolute. It never was. It only feels that way when things move in the direction we expect. But the moment they don't, we begin to see the edges, the boundaries we didn't realize were there. And I thought about how often I've tried to push past those boundaries, to force something to happen, to hold on to something longer than it naturally lasted, to shape outcomes that were already moving in another direction, and how that always felt tight, heavy, exhausting, as if I was pushing against something invisible, something that did not respond to force. And maybe that's exactly what it is. Not resistance from the world, but resistance against the thread. And that thought was difficult to accept at first, because it means that some things, no matter how much effort we apply, will not change. Not because we are incapable, but because they are not meant to be different. And I know that idea can feel limiting. It can feel like something is being taken away. But as I stayed with it, something else began to emerge, a different kind of understanding, because if control is not about changing everything, then what is it? And the answer came quietly. Control is how you move within what is already there, not the ability to rewrite the thread, but the awareness of how you walk it, the way you respond, the way you see, the way you experience each moment as it unfolds. And that changes everything. Because it means that even within a path that is already shaped, there is still something that belongs to you. Not the direction, but the presence. Not the outcome, but the experience. And I realized I had been confusing the two, trying to control the outcome while neglecting the experience, trying to secure the future while missing the present. And maybe that's why it always felt incomplete, because no matter how much you shape the outside, if you are not fully within the moment, it never feels like enough. And slowly, that pressure began to fade, not because life became easier, but because I stopped expecting it to follow my plan exactly. I began to allow instead of force, to observe instead of constantly adjust. And in that shift, there was something unexpected, not weakness, not passivity, but a different kind of strength. The strength to move forward without needing to control everything. The strength to continue even when the outcome is uncertain. And the strength to accept that some things were never mine to decide. And in that acceptance, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not certainty, but ease. A quiet easing of the constant tension, the constant need to hold everything together. And for the first time, I began to understand that control was never about having power over everything. It was about being present within what already is, and that is something I can finally hold without resistance. And then something unexpected happened, not in the story, but in me. After sitting with all of this, the threads, the loom, the sisters, the quiet certainty that even gods cannot escape, I expected to feel smaller, limited, restrained, as if something had been taken away, but instead, what I felt was something entirely different, a kind of quiet release. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just space, because I realized something I hadn't seen before. The weight I had been carrying, the constant pressure to control everything, to fix everything, to make every outcome align with what I thought it should be. That weight was never required. It was something I had placed on myself, based on an idea of control that was never complete. And when that idea began to loosen, even slightly, something else became possible. Not giving up, not stopping effort, but letting go of unnecessary resistance. I thought about how often I had measured my life against expectations, against timelines, against outcomes that I believed defined success, and how quickly I judged myself when things didn't match, as if every delay, every change, every unexpected turn was a failure. But what if those moments were never failures? What if they were simply part of the thread, unfolding exactly as it was meant to? Not in a way that removes responsibility, but in a way that removes blame. Because if something was never meant to be different, then the energy I spent fighting it was never going to change it. And I began to see how much of my tension came from that fight. The constant effort to force clarity, to force direction, to force certainty. And slowly that effort began to soften, not disappear, but transform into something quieter, more aligned. I still move, I still act, I still choose, but I no longer feel the need to control every outcome. And that shift changes the experience of everything, because instead of holding tightly, I can move more freely. Instead of resisting what I don't understand, I can allow it to unfold, not passively, not without awareness, but without the constant tension of needing it to be different. And in that, there is something that feels almost unfamiliar, a kind of peace, not because everything is clear, but because it doesn't need to be. And I thought again about Zeus, standing in that chamber, realizing for the first time that his power has limits, and choosing not to fight it, not because he is weak, but because he understands. And maybe that is where real strength begins, not in forcing reality to match your will, but in recognizing the shape of what is and moving within it with awareness. And I stayed with that idea, letting it settle slowly without rushing to define it, because some understandings don't need to be explained fully, they just need to be felt. And as I sat there within the quiet rhythm of the loom, within the presence of something older than thought, older than effort, older than control itself, I realized something simple. I am not here to control the thread. I am here to live it. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but fully, and for the first time, that felt enough, not as an answer, but as a way forward, quiet, steady, and real. And after everything I had seen, everything I had felt, the question returned one more time, but this time it felt different, quieter, less urgent. If it's already written, then what do I do now? Not as a challenge, not as resistance, but as a genuine curiosity, because I realized this question is not about fate, it's about how I live within it. I used to think that if life had a fixed structure, then meaning would disappear. That if the path was already shaped, then effort wouldn't matter. That everything would feel predetermined and therefore empty. But standing here, within this deeper understanding, I began to see something else. The structure does not remove meaning, it gives it form. Because without form, there is nothing to experience. Without boundaries, there is nothing to move through. And I thought about something simple, a story. If you already know how a story ends, does that make the journey meaningless? Or does it allow you to experience it differently, to notice the details, to feel each moment without constantly trying to control what comes next? And maybe life is not so different. Maybe the thread is not there to limit us, but to hold the experience together, to give it continuity, direction, shape, so that each moment can exist fully within something complete. And I began to understand that my role was never to rewrite the thread. It was to step into it, to live it, to experience it, without constantly trying to escape it. And that idea changed the way I saw everything. Because instead of asking, how do I control this? I started asking, how do I experience this? How do I move through this moment with awareness, with presence, with honesty? How do I feel what is here without immediately trying to change it or judge it or replace it with something else? And that shift is subtle, but it transforms the entire experience. Because when you stop trying to force the future, the present becomes clearer, not easier, but more real, more grounded. And I realized that maybe this is where freedom actually exists, not in changing the thread, but in how I live each part of it. The tone I bring into a moment. This is the way I respond, the awareness I carry, the willingness to be present even when things are uncertain. That is something that remains, even within a path that is already shaped. And I thought about how much time I've spent trying to become something, trying to reach a point where everything feels settled, where everything finally makes sense. But what if that point was never the goal? What if the goal was never to arrive, but to live fully as the thread unfolds? And that thought didn't feel like giving up. It felt like returning to something simple, something I had overlooked. The fact that this moment right now is already part of the thread. It doesn't need to be improved or replaced or escaped. It only needs to be experienced. And I stayed with that, letting it settle slowly, not forcing myself to accept it completely, just allowing it to be. Because sometimes understanding is not something you achieve, it's something that unfolds just like everything else. And as I sat with that quiet realization, I felt something shift again, not towards certainty, but toward clarity, a softer, steadier way of seeing that doesn't need everything to be different in order to feel at peace. And for the first time, I wasn't asking how to change the thread, I was asking how to live it well. And as that question settled, how do I live it well? Another one followed, softer but deeper. If I cannot change the thread, then what does freedom actually mean? Because for so long, I believed freedom meant possibility, the ability to choose anything, to become anything, to go anywhere, without limits. But standing here within everything I had come to understand, that definition began to feel incomplete. Because unlimited choice is not the same as meaningful experience. And having no boundaries does not always create clarity. Sometimes it creates confusion. And I began to see that maybe freedom was never about removing all structure. Maybe it was about something else entirely, something quieter, more grounded. Freedom might be how you move within the structure that already exists, not escaping the thread, but becoming aware of it, feeling its direction, its rhythm, and choosing how you respond to it, not controlling where it goes, but how you walk along it. And that distinction changed something in me because it meant I didn't have to fight the limits anymore. I didn't have to see them as obstacles. I could begin to see them as part of the design, not restricting me, but shaping the experience. I thought about a simple example, a piece of music. It follows structure, rhythm, timing. Without that structure, it becomes noise. But within that structure, there is expression, emotion, creativity, movement. And maybe life is similar. The thread provides the structure, but the way it is lived, the way it is felt, the way it is experienced, that is where freedom exists, not in changing the notes, but in how they are played. And I realized that I had been looking for freedom in the wrong place. I had been searching for it in outcomes, in control, in certainty, but those things were never stable. They shifted, they changed, they moved beyond my reach. And when I tied my sense of freedom to them, I always felt limited. But when I shifted my attention to the present, to the way I moved through each moment, something different appeared. A quieter, more stable kind of freedom. One that does not depend on everything going the way I expect. One that exists even when things are uncertain, even when the path is unclear, and that kind of freedom feels different. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply allows the moment to be what it is. It allows experience to unfold without constant resistance. It allows me to be here fully. And I noticed something else. When I stopped trying to control everything, I began to notice more. The details I used to overlook, the subtle shifts, the quiet transitions, the way one moment leads into another, not randomly, but with a kind of quiet continuity. And I realized this is what I had been missing, not control, but awareness. Because when you are fully present, the thread is no longer something abstract. It becomes something you can feel in the way a conversation unfolds, in the way a moment lingers, in the way something ends and something else begins. And for the first time, I didn't feel trapped within the thread. I felt aligned with it. Not perfectly, not always, but enough to notice the difference. And that difference is subtle, but it changes everything because it transforms life from something you are trying to control into something you are actually experiencing. And in that experience, there is a kind of freedom that doesn't depend on changing anything at all. And as I stayed with that feeling, that quieter kind of freedom, something else began to unfold, something I hadn't expected, a different kind of peace. Not the kind that comes when everything is resolved, when every question has an answer, when every outcome aligns perfectly, but something deeper, something that exists even when things remain uncertain. I used to think peace meant clarity, that if I could just understand everything, if I could predict what was coming, if I could remove every unknown, then I would finally feel calm. But that kind of peace was always temporary because life never stays still. It keeps moving, shifting, changing, and every time something new appeared, the uncertainty returned, and with it, the tension, the need to figure things out again. But now, something was different because I was no longer trying to eliminate uncertainty. I was learning how to sit with it, not as something to solve, but as something that naturally exists within the thread. And that shift changed the way everything felt, because instead of resisting the unknown, I began to allow it, not passively, not without awareness, but without the constant pressure to control it. And in that allowance, there was space for things to unfold, space for moments to reveal themselves, without being forced into meaning too quickly. And I began to notice something subtle. When I stopped trying to define everything immediately, the experience becomes richer, more detailed, more present, more real, because I am no longer rushing past it. I am actually in it. And that creates a different kind of peace, one that is not dependent on answers, but on presence. I thought about the thread again, not as something distant, not as something abstract, but as something I'm already within, moving through moment by moment. And I realized the thread does not demand perfection. It does not require me to understand every part of it. It only continues, steady, constant, whether I resist it or move with it. And somehow that realization softened something even more. The need to get everything right, the fear of making the wrong choice, the pressure to ensure that every step leads to the best possible outcome, because if the thread already has its form, then not every moment needs to be perfect. It only needs to be lived. And that idea felt almost unfamiliar at first, because I had spent so much time trying to optimize, trying to improve, trying to make every moment count in a specific way. But now, I began to see something different. The value of a moment does not come from how well it fits a plan. It comes from how fully it is experienced. Even the quiet moments, even the uncertain ones, even the ones that don't seem significant at the time, they are all part of the thread, all part of the pattern, and I don't need to elevate them or change them to make them meaningful. They already are. And I sat with that, letting it settle slowly, not trying to hold on to it too tightly, not trying to turn it into something fixed, just allowing it to exist, because that is what this piece feels like. Not something you grasp, but something you allow. And as I remained there in that quiet awareness, I noticed something else. The questions, the ones that used to feel so urgent, so necessary, began to soften, not disappear, but lose their weight, because I no longer needed immediate answers. I no longer needed everything to be clear, and in that there was a kind of calm that didn't come from knowing, but from accepting that not everything needs to be known, and for the first time, that felt enough. And now, as everything begins to settle, as the images grow softer, as the questions lose their sharp edges, there is only one thing left, not something to solve, not something to understand completely, but something to carry, gently. The thread, your thread, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how long it is. I don't know where it began or where it will end. And maybe that was never something I was meant to know. But I can feel it now in a way I couldn't before, not as an idea, but as a quiet presence, something that has always been there, moving beneath everything, every moment, every breath, every step, not random, not disconnected, but part of something continuous. And I think this is where everything changes. Not in the world outside, not in the events that will come and go, but in how I meet them, because I no longer feel the same need to control what I cannot see. I no longer feel the same urgency to force certainty into every unknown. Instead, there is something quieter, a willingness to move with what unfolds, to trust, not blindly, not passively, but with a kind of steady awareness that whatever this thread holds, it is already part of something whole. And I thought about the beginning, that first feeling that something didn't make sense, that quiet discomfort, that subtle tension. And I realize now it wasn't a problem to fix. It was a door into a different way of seeing, a different way of being, one that doesn't require everything to be controlled, one that allows life to unfold without constant resistance. And maybe that is what this has always been leading to. Not an answer, but a shift from trying to hold everything together to allowing things to move as they already are. And as I sit with that, the space feels different now. Not because it has changed, but because I have. The loom is still there, the threads still hang, the rhythm continues as it always has, and somewhere, quietly, patiently, the three sisters remain. Not watching, not judging, not interfering, simply doing what they have always done. And for the first time, I don't feel the need to see them clearly. I don't need to understand every detail of their work. It is enough to know that it continues, that something holds the pattern, even when I cannot see it. And that knowledge, however quiet, is enough to change how I rest. Because now I don't feel like I am drifting without direction. I feel like I am moving within something that has always been there. And as the thoughts begin to fade, as the edges of awareness soften, I return to something simple, this moment, this breath, this quiet space where nothing needs to be decided, nothing needs to be fixed, nothing needs to be controlled, only experienced, gently, slowly, without effort. And if there is one thing I carry from all of this, it is not certainty, it is not control, it is not even understanding, it is something softer, something steadier, a quiet trust that whatever this thread holds, I can meet it, not perfectly, not completely, but honestly, and that is enough. So now there is nothing left to do, nothing left to figure out, only to rest, to let the thread continue, to let the moment pass as it always does, and to allow yourself just for a while to be here within it, at peace.